Okay, so tonight's topic is down payment strategies, and we're just going to go over four basic ways to save towards a down payment of a home. I know it's a little bit rough these days. Interest rates are still highish. I could tell you right now on the field that it's really, really active real estate wise. Are we like how we were back in 2020, 2021? No, I don't see the crazy overbidding, but definitely if you're looking for a condo that's well located, if you're looking for a single dwelling home, most likely you won't be the only bidder. So it's important to make sure whether you're buying now or you're planning to buy in a few years, you want to make sure that all your ducks in order. And tonight I'm going to talk about ways to come up with a down payment for your real estate purchase. So number one, and it's very, very basic. The first way is just to save and put money aside. And it sounds basic and everyone should know this, but being a mortgage broker, working in finance, I could tell you that we live in a society now where it's just instant gratification. So I have a lot of people coming to me who want to buy a home. And when I ask them the basic questions, do you have stable income? How's your credit? Do you have down payment? A lot of people don't, or they have very little. I do have clients who come to me who want to buy something. Their income is average and they only have, let's say, $10,000 as a down payment. In Montreal, off island, that's really not going to get you much. If home ownership is a priority for you, back in the day, you used to save for years. You used to save for several years towards the down payment of a home. It's very basic. Make sure your finances in order. Make sure you make enough money, earn enough money, keep your debt under management or at nothing, and make sure you put money aside. And is it going to come in 6 months? No, unless you are very, very disciplined, you make a good income and you have little expenses. It's so simple, yet I feel I need to repeat it because sometimes people feel that they wonder why they can't afford to buy a home. A lot of it has to do with the down payment and it takes time and patience. It's not going to happen overnight. Unfortunately, most of us don't have the discipline to come up with like a $50,000 down payment in 6 months. So it might take a few years. So number one is simple, save, put money aside. Are you earning enough money to put money aside? These are questions you need to ask yourself, and these are conversations that I have with clients. Do you earn enough money to even put money aside? And if the answer is no, now we have to address other issues in your financial situation that are going to affect the possibility of home ownership for you. Number two, we're going to take a little bit longer with this, is the FHSA, RRSP, and TFSA debate. So when people are, they're financially sound, they have good income, and they are ready to start putting money aside. The question is, where should I put this money? So before I get into the how, let's go over the different accounts, just the basics, how they function. And there is no one answer for this because there's the general overall answer and then there's what applies to your situation. So traditionally, people in Canada, how they saved up towards the down payment of a home, the home buyer's plan through an RRSP account was the most popular. So an RRSP is a registered retirement savings plan. And how it works is that when you contribute to an RRSP, any contributions that you make become a tax deductible. So if you contribute $5,000 today into an RRSP, next year when you file your income taxes, whatever you've been paying taxes on this year, you've overpaid because that $5,000 RRSP contribution reduces your taxable income. So when you file your income taxes next year, you're going to receive the difference that you overpaid in income taxes. As a first-time home buyer, over the last decade or so, you were allowed to withdraw up to $35,000 from your RRSP without penalty, without being taxed, without having to pay a withholding tax or penalty. You're allowed to withdraw up to $35,000 from your RRSP as a first-time home buyer. Does it necessarily have to be towards the down payment? No. The eligibility requirement is that you are purchasing a home and you are considered a first-time home buyer. What's the catch? The catch is that you do have to pay this back. You have 15 years to pay it back, and it starts after the second year. Last week, this changed. The federal government increased the amount you're allowed to withdraw from your RRSP to $60,000. So as of last week, you are allowed to withdraw up to $60,000 from your RRSP to use towards the purchase of a first home. Again, you need to repay it. Another thing that changed is until the end of I should have looked this up until the end, I think, of December 2025, but I'll double check and write it out for you in the Facebook group. You still have 15 years to pay it back, but the repayments don't start for 5 years, for another 5 years as opposed to 2 years. So that's something that's changed recently. So that's how the RRSP works. You could use it as a first-time home buyer through the home buyer's plan. You do have to pay it back within 15 years, whether it's after 2 years or 5 years. And the limit is $60,000. The TFSA, the tax-free savings account, was created in 2009. And the idea of this account is that when you make contributions to the account, no matter how much the money grows, when you withdraw it, it's non-taxable. That's the benefit of it. There are no contribution, there are no deductions. So whatever you contribute, it's not tax deductible, but the benefit is that there's no capital gains tax. It's not taxable income. You could increase, your returns could grow exponentially. It doesn't matter. When you withdraw the money, it's non-taxable. So that before last year was another way that Canadians put money aside towards the down payment of a home. It doesn't have to be towards the down payment of a home. TFSA is very flexible. It could be used for anything. Could be for an emergency fund, could be a rainy day fund, could be used for retirement, could be used towards the down payment of a home. It's not specific for the down payment of a home. It could be used for anything. Important to remember, contributions are not tax deductible. And your limit depends on your age and how long you've been in Canada. Every year, it's not dependent on your income. Every year, the federal government decides how much eligible Canadians are allowed to contribute to the TFSA, and it varies. So the last couple of years, it's been $6,500. This year was $7,000. Next year, it could be another $7,000. They usually announce the amount in their budget that they release in September. So we'll know probably in September what next year's limit will be. So those two, until last year, were the two traditional ways that Canadians saved towards the down payment of a home. April last year, the federal government launched or rolled out the FHSA, First Home Savings Account. It's a combination of how the RRSP works and how the TFSA works. So First Home Savings Account is designed for you to save towards the down payment of a home. Contributions, like the RRSP, are tax deductible. So whatever you contribute, you could deduct from when you file your income taxes. When you withdraw the money, not taxable. Unlike the RRSP, you do not have to repay back this money. However, there are limits when it comes to contributions. So anybody here have an FHSA open?
I do.
Sure.
I just opened it early this year.
Okay, perfect. So unlike the TFSA, the contribution room does not automatically roll over, and there are limits to the rollover. So last year was when the FHSA was launched. Last year's limit was $8,000, so it's an annual limit of $8,000 to a lifetime maximum of $40,000 you're allowed to contribute to this account. If you did not open an FHSA last year, that $8,000 of contribution room doesn't automatically roll over to this year. So if you didn't open one last year, but you opened up one this year, your contribution room is only $8,000, not $16,000. The other thing is, let's say you open up an account this year, you don't put any money in it, and next year as well, you have the account, so your contribution limit from this year rolls over to next year. Next year comes around and money's tight. You have a contribution room of $16,000, but you just don't have the extra money. So now we're in 2025. you have $16,000 of contribution room. When you get to 2026, there isn't another $8,000 of contribution room. The maximum rollover is $16,000. So it can only roll over by 1 year. But it's still a great program, just very limited in terms of contribution, how much you could contribute. As you all probably know, $8,000 really isn't going to get you far when it comes to a down payment of a home, but it helps because your contributions are tax deductible. And if you have it in your head that I'm going to put money aside for the next 5 years, $8,000, look, you get your contribution. You don't have to repay it. So those are the main points of the 3 different accounts. The question is, what's the best way to contribute? There are many ways and many formulas on how you could do it. In the perfect world, let's say you have all the room in the world. You've never saved, you have unlimited room, you're a first-time home buyer, and you make a decent amount of income. Ideally, you maximize your FHSA, then you move towards your RRSP, and then if you need any more, monies towards a down payment of a home, then whatever you get back as a tax refund, you could add it to your TFSA, or maybe to an FHSA or RRSP, something like that. So you have a little bit of all 3. If you have currently an RRSP, if you have an RRSP and don't like the idea of using the home buyers plan, you are allowed to transfer your RRSP, up to $8,000 or $16,000, depending on when your account was open. You're allowed to transfer the money from your RRSP to an FHSA. And the amount depends on the contribution room that you have in your FHSA. You won't receive the tax deduction because you can't double dip. If you contributed to an RRSP, you already received the tax deduction, but you're allowed to transfer up to your allowed contribution room from your RRSP to your FHSA. And why would you do that? Because you don't want to repay the money. You don't want to repay back what you took out, like with the RRSP. With the RRSP, for whatever reason, people think that it's negative to repay back this money. It's not a negative thing. It's literally, the home buyers plan is an interest-free loan to yourself that you need to repay back over 15 years. And don't forget, you're repaying back to yourself, and it's for your retirement. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. I know that there's a lot of negativity that comes with that. Oh, I have to repay it. I don't like that. But you're repaying yourself back. So, and it's for your retirement. So it's not the end of the world. Obviously, if it's invested as you repay it, don't just leave it like in a money market fund. And as for the TFSA is kind of the last option, only because there's no tax benefit. So if I were starting out and I'm like, okay, Lynn, I want to buy my first home in seven years, I would probably go the route of FHSA or RSP, and any monies that I get from filing my income taxes and income tax return, I'd probably put it in the TFSA. But exactly where we're putting money into also depends on your financial situation. Why would I choose to put money in a TFSA? What if you have no other money? You don't have any liquid cash. You don't have any emergency fund. And all your money's tied up in an FHSA or an RRSP. Those have tax consequences when you make withdrawals, unless you withdraw for the specific reasons that you're allowed to. It's good to have a TFSA as just in case money on the side. So there isn't a black and white answer, but you are allowed to move funds. You are allowed to move funds over. If you maximize or you put money in an FHSA and it turns out that you don't buy a home, you could always transfer it to your RRSP without any penalty. And even if you've maximized your RRSP, like let's say you have no contribution room, you're allowed to transfer the FHSA to your RRSP. Another thing, if you have a TFSA, you have a tax-free savings account and you have a good amount in there, you're not paycheck to paycheck, and it's later on in the year, you're thinking of buying your first home, you could transfer some of that TFSA to an FHSA. That way you'll have money in the FHSA, and when you file your income taxes, you'll get the return, you'll get a return back. You could also do that with the RRSP. Just keep in mind any monies that you transfer to the RRSP and you use in the home buyers plan, you'll need to repay that over 15 years. So that's the FHSA, RRSP, TFSA debate. There isn't one answer for it. Like if you want a super perfect world, maximize your FHSA, maximize your RRSP, then go with the TFSA. But even that as a blanket statement, it doesn't apply for everybody. It really boils down to your financial situation. Do you even have RRSP room? Do you even have TFSA room? So it depends on these little details. That's going to be different for each and every one of us. Number 3, something that people don't talk about. Let's say you're planning on buying your first home. I just find a lot of people don't plan as well, and they'll either, let's say, out of school, they'll start their own business, or they'll take a job somewhere that doesn't have a lot of benefits. If you want to speed up the process into buying your first home, but you might not have enough liquid cash to come up with the down payment, one way to go around it is make sure that you work for a company that offers employer matching programs. So I have a lot of clients who work for big companies, like big corporations. Their income isn't necessarily high, but what helps them out is that their companies offer matching programs. So for example, you could open up a TFSA, you could open up an RRSP, group RRSP, and the employer will match to a certain amount. And it's not a bad thing. I know everyone talks about, oh, you shouldn't work for a big corporation, don't be one of those people, but this is one of the benefits of working for a big company that offers these programs. And this can help you actually speed up the process of you coming up with a down payment so that you could purchase your first home. And it works because I've seen it with clients who've made, in Montreal, let's say single people around the $50,000 range. It's not a huge income that stands out, that pops out at you as someone who wants to buy their first home on their own. But because they worked for one of the big banks or a big company, they were able to come up with a rather large down payment. And it was a matter of, okay, for the next 5 to 7 years, I'm going to work here. I'm going to maximize whatever my employer matches. I'm going to make sure that I'm going to invest the money, and I'm going to speed up the process, because if I did it on my own, it would take me 12 years. Now, whatever you do after that, after your qualification, after you buy your home, that's up to you. It's not any of my business. But if you are, if your goal is absolutely, I want to buy a home, I see it, eyes on the prize, and you're in a financial situation where it's going to take you forever to come up with it because you're paying all their things or whatnot. This is a way that you could do it, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I think we've kind of swayed away with all the options that we have now in life. We've swayed away from that. We'll work for the mom and pop company that doesn't have benefits, but we'll stay with them because they're like family. But it's not going to help you out financially. So if this is a goal for you and you want to help speed this up, that might be a way to go about it. Work for a company that will help you, do it. Just a footnote on that. For the most part, if it's a locked-in RRSP that the employer offers, you can't withdraw that. That's only eligible at age 65. So if this is something that, as you're doing your interview, and this is a deal breaker for you, you want to make sure that TFSAs are always allowed to cash out, and RRSPs in general, when it's just a regular group RRSP, you're allowed to, for the most part, you're allowed to cash out to the home buyers plan. The last thing I wanted to talk about, which thankfully has become more and more popular, is our RRSP loans. So I do a lot of RRSP loans at the beginning of the year with my sole proprietor business owner clients. Why do we take out an RRSP loan? Because small businesses, sole proprietors always owe money in taxes. And this is a way for them to reduce their income tax owing, because again, RRSP contributions reduce your taxable income. RRSP loans are also a great way for you to top up your down payments. What do I mean by that? Let's just say you earn $100,000 a year and you only have $30,000 as a down payment. $30,000, you could buy something, but it's not a lot, and or your monthly payment might be a lot, even if you qualify. You could consider or look into taking out an RRSP loan to top up your down payment. And like I said, you're allowed to withdraw up to $60,000 from your RRSP now to the home buyers plan. You personally need to make sure how much contribution room you actually have. And then it's a matter of numbers. So if I take out this amount as a loan, this is what my payments are going to be on the loan, because you have to repay it. But when we look at the property that you're going to purchase, by having a bigger down payment, now I've reduced the amount of my mortgage and my payments are this much. It's a calculation and it's going to be different for everybody. Our RSP loan, even if you haven't paid it back yet, like let's say, and I've done this many times, let's say you take it out in the beginning of the year in January, and you have 2 years to pay it back. Even if you haven't repaid it, you're allowed to use the full amount. Even if you haven't you're allowed to use the full amount, even if you haven't repaid it yet. So how will it work in your situation? It always boils down to the numbers. People always say, well, isn't it bad to take out debt, in order to purchase a home? It is if the numbers don't work. If you fall over your debt ratios, then naturally it doesn't work. But think of it as a car payment. You're allowed to have a car payment and purchase a home as long as your numbers are under the debt ratios that are allowed by the government. And the actual calculation of how much of that applies to your debt levels is exactly the same for a car payment. So if you're eligible to buy with $100,000 income, let's say a $400,000 condo, and you have a $35,000 car loan, which is more or less, what it is, 35 to 60,000, and you're under the debt levels, the same thing would apply. The same qualifying rates would apply for an RSP loan. And for a lot of people, this is how that they purchased, because they didn't have enough of a down payment. They didn't want to wait anymore. But you have to calculate the numbers and see if it applies. But it's helped out a lot of people. I know I've done it personally for clients. Do I suggest it to everybody? No. Can I suggest it to everybody? No. It's really the numbers. What do the numbers boil down to? And those are the 4 main down payment strategies that I wanted to talk about tonight. Number 1, save. Very basic, but do it. Like it's not going to happen overnight. Number 2, figuring out with your particular situation how to save that money. What do you put in the FHSA? What do you put in the RSP? What do you put in the TFSA? Number 3, if coming up with a down payment on your own is difficult, consider working for a company that offers these programs and hopefully matches. It's also forced savings. If you know that your company is taking it directly out of your paycheck, you'll likely keep that because it's so annoying to call HR and to stop those payments, versus having a contribution plan on your own with your own bank or with your financial advisor, where it's so much easier just to pick up the phone and cancel your contributions. Okay, so consider it. It depends what type of saver you are. It depends how good you are with money. And even if you are good with money, it speeds up the process, if that's a situation in your case. And lastly, consider an RRSP loan. Another thing with the RRSP loan right now, FHSA loans are not rolled out with all financial institutions yet. They're slowly going to come out. Consider an RRSP loan. And also, if you don't like the idea of having to repay it back, there's always the possibility of transferring it to the FHSA. You still have to repay the actual loan, but you don't have to repay back through the home buyers plan. Okay, so that's an option.